Welcome back to the fourth season of Michigan Lacrosse Review. My name is Greg Norman. I'm lucky enough to be with my broadcast partner, John Losey. We're bringing you a bit of a different program this year. We're going to try and bring you more information about lacrosse instead of just long-term interviews. And I think it's going to serve the public, and I think it'll serve lacrosse in Michigan much better. So, John, first of all, thanks for joining us, and it'll be a fun season. We're going to get a chance to talk about a lot of stuff, and I'm hoping that we can enjoy the conversations and enlighten a few folks.
100%. No, I'm very excited, and thank you, sir, for pushing this along and everything you've been doing, and having to include me in everything. This is it's going to be great.
We're trying to bring some other voices to the table, so you and I are going to have a conversation once a week. Actually, October, November, December, we're going to do this once a month. Try to bring you a better show. We'll go twice a week, and when we get to January and February, and hopefully on season when we get to March, we can do maybe every 10 days and kind of keep everybody up to breast. The difference this year is we're going to bring in local people and have conversations about high schools. Our program up for 3 years has been long-form interviews with some of the best players in the country and certainly some of the coaches. We want to continue that. On this show is bringing on board Whipsnakes all-time star Will Manny, who was a longtime player and coach at Utah and a former Long Island guy. We get a chance to talk to him. So we still get to do the long-form interview. We also get to touch base a little bit with Ron Ebert. Ron is now the all-time winningest coach in Michigan high school history. We check in with Brian Kamiskas, which is a little bit of a sort of a coaching tip on how to play defense. And then we're going to talk a little bit to Bryce Brubaker about 3D gloves. And until you see the interview, you got to see the interview to believe it. You think of 3D printers, and now you think of 3D gloves. You wonder where, with AI, John, and 3D stuff, the world's changing in front of our eyes.
Big time. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've seen it everywhere. So, it doesn't surprise me when I first heard about the 3D gloves, I was very intrigued on how that's going to come out. So it's it's a great interview that I think everyone's going to really gain some good insight on where the future of the sport and sports in general.
I'm going to take care of the long-term interviews with some of the guys we've been interviewing, in this case, Will Manny. You're going to bring the sort of the local focus because you've got a much better handle on what's going on in the Michigan prep scene. I know I'm a coach, but you get a chance to see a lot more landscape than I do. And talk a little bit about what you're going to bring and what you're hoping to bring to the show.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just as you described, really getting to speak to coaches and players within the state of Michigan. I think that's where we're going to start. I think that's where we live and spend the majority of our time here, and just getting really an inside feel. It's not going to be long interviews. We want to make it quick and make it interesting and hold the attention of everybody out there. But for this week, for instance, I had Ajay Chawla, head coach of Brother Rice Lacrosse, set to come in. But he had a family situation and wasn't able to. And I talked to Andy Shira from Forest Hill Central about coming into. So, not looking at just the top teams, or the top coaches, but really spreading it out. I think, in order to grow the sport, as you know, Greg, and you and I have talked about, it's got to be everybody. It's got to come from everybody. And I know everybody puts who wins the state championship every year and where they go and all that stuff. But in reality, it's got to be everybody. And so I'm looking forward to really branching out and spending some time with a lot of different people within the state.
The landscape's expanding. The Michigan Lacrosse Review will have more than just national guys. We'll actually have Michigan guys, which is the title of the show.
Right.
And we're going to get going here in a couple of seconds. We had a chance to spend some time with Will Manny, and I think you're going to find it to be an interesting interview. And again, John, thanks for coming aboard, and Will will be back with us in a couple of seconds. Welcome back for the fourth season of Michigan Lacrosse Review. We've got a chance to talk to maybe one of the best lacrosse attacks that's ever played the game. But I want to start out with a very simple question. Who is the best attack to ever come out of St. Anthony's? Is it you? Or is it just you came from a place in Long Island that is phenomenal, and you guys have had a chance to. St. Anthony's produced a lot of players. Certainly you're among the best, but where do you rank yourself in that group?
I don't know. There's some really good ones, that played before me, after me. And, you have Tom, you have O'Neill. But again, right, I just credit the school, the coaching staff at St. Anthony's for challenging us and coaching us the right way, right? I just finished my 11th professional season. So I think that goes back to the roots of giving us the love of the game, teaching us the way to, not just exist, but excel and really do well. So I don't know. I'm grateful I came from that place and got to meet all my friends and future teammates and guys I play against consistently, because they call it the factory for a reason. And, you know, it's only getting better and better for kids getting the chance to play college lacrosse out of St. Anthony's.
For an old guy from Lake Placid who spent a lot of time understanding the old paradigms, what is it about Long Island attackmen? You went back 25 years, you're looking for an attackman, you go to Long Island. I've asked this question of a number of guys who've come off the island. What is it about attack, and what is it about finding them on that particular part of the world? I know the sport is regionalized, certainly, and it's grown and it's gotten bigger. I mean, you're in an area of Utah where it's exploding, but that's still, that attack from Long Island still holds to be somewhat true. What is it they do different there?
Yeah, right. Everyone always says there's probably something in the water there, right? But you know, I think from my experience, I just think we're taught at a young age that there's so many things as an attackman you can do to affect a game, right? If you're not shooting the ball well, you ride really hard, right? And you set good picks, you become a good passer, you play fast off ball. I think you just learn so many of the IQ and tactical pieces of the game at a young age. And everyone around you is really good. So you hold yourself to a standard to practice on your own and continue to raise your standard. And for me, I have been really blessed with great coaches since my PAL days on Long Island, right? And I had some of my friends' dads who played lacrosse growing up on Long Island. And then obviously St. Anthony's with Coach Schreiber, Coach Weiserek, Coach Chanichuk. So I think Long Island just breeds those kids to understand the game early, and then people pick and choose, you know, I want to be great at these things, and then they excel at them. And there's a toughness aspect to it, right? I think that's just part of coming from Long Island. There's a mental toughness piece to it where you want to represent our area well, and it's only getting more and more competitive in the lacrosse world throughout the world and in our country. So everyone's raising their standards and their ability to get better.
We're going to talk a little bit about Utah Summit towards the end of this, because I want to talk about some of the very specific teaching methods that I think you're doing a little bit different than a lot of other places. And I think people are starting to notice what you're doing. But that said, there's a lot of stuff you're doing in Utah now. What came from before?
Say that one more time.
I said, what you're doing in Utah now, does that, a lot of that came from what you learned back in Long Island? It's sort of bringing that updated, certainly, because obviously equipment changes and process changes, but is a lot of that the same sort of early understanding of the sport?
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I'm very grateful to be working with Adam Gittleman, who's one of my best friends. I lived with him in Boston when I first graduated from UMass. We were playing on the Cannons together, and he was coaching at Harvard. And, you know, we came out here with the Holmans to coach at the University of Utah. And, you know, all four of us, Brian, Holman, Marcus, myself, and Adam, all have that East Coast blood, right? We had two Maryland guys in the Holmans and us from Long Island. And when we came out here, there was a little bit of a culture shock where our goal was to do it the right way, not push or force the issue of how, you know, tough coaching and or the amount of times we put on practices or skills clinics overwhelms people. But I think we brought that slowly but surely in the right pace to the Utah area here in the Mountain West region of, you know, the practicing after practice and attending skills sessions and getting taught the right way to hold your stick and shoot the ball and communicate. And for us, that's, you know, what I like to say to my kids and my parents when we have introduction calls to summer and fall seasons for Summit, it's like, you know, I'm 5'7", 5'8" on a good day, right? Like I listened to my coaches and brought those other aspects to my game of, you know, having a really good stick, communicating well, because if I didn't do those things, I wouldn't even have a chance of playing in the PLL right now. Right. So we're trying to do that, right? We did it with the University of Utah in our recruitment. We did it with the kids we had at school. And now we're doing it with Summit where, the East Coast, you know, blood is still in us and will never go away. And we're challenging our kids to practice harder and commit to the game because we want multi-sport athletes, right? And everyone does, and it's good for everyone's mentality and ability to move around a lacrosse field, but it's not getting any easier with how good kids are getting at a young age now. And we try to put on as many camps, clinics, positional work stuff outside of our practices for our kids to get extra reps as much as we can. And it's worked out really well.
You look over the last decade, you look at Denver, you look at Park City, or you look at Salt Lake City, you look at San Diego, some of these hotspots. Obviously right now, Minneapolis has really started to take off. Texas has done some And all of it was contributed by, if you look at the original, sort of founders in those areas, they all had East Coast. They also had, that's where they came from. And I think they brought something a little bit different. The sport at the moment, according to the Federation, isn't growing. It's staying about where it was. It was growing at about an 8% rate. Now I think we're down to 3%. So that doesn't give it that same process. But talk to the idea that you are playing professional lacrosse at, as they say in Rudy, 100 nothing and 5 foot nothing. So you get a chance to play the sport. You can be a small man in this sport and be very good and be an excel. You don't have to be a 6'5" behemoth. It helps certainly, but you've been unbelievably successful with what you're doing. And that message, I'm not sure, is getting down to some of the smaller, younger guys.
Yeah, no, and right, that is an upsetting thing where, I've heard it in my career. I've heard other coaches talk to kids out here in Utah about it, where it's just like, oh, he's just too small right now. It's like, that's a cop out. And what we like to say, Marcus and I said this with one of our University of Utah players, Brandon Wilson, shout out to B-Dubs, heart over height, right? And if you have that within you, you'll find ways to get on the field. You'll find ways to have your coach not, keep you on the sideline. And, those are the aspects of having a really good stick, being a good communicator, having the IQ of doing what the coaches are asking you, get set up in your sets, clear the ball the right way, play fundamental defense, right? And there's always room for a smaller short stick D midi to cover a short midi, right? There's guys everywhere. And for the younger aged kids, it is a little difficult, right? I was one of those kids that when I was in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I'm going against the defenseman, the top of my helmet's at the middle of his jersey. And you have a little bit of that fright in you where it's like getting hit or getting checked is a little bit of a fear thing. But once it happens once or twice and you're going to be okay and you score, that's what I continue to push our kids that are on the smaller side to do, is like, use your quickness, right? He can't cover you if you roll at goal in here, right? And trust me, when you score, he's not going to want to press out on you anymore. So you just try to find those coaching patterns to get the kids confidence. And for me, it's fun because I have a lot of those conversations, not just within my club, but when I meet kids on PLL weekends, the first question they ask is, what do you do as an undersized attackman? Right. And I have messages in my direct messages on Instagram from kids all over the world asking that stuff. And it's just so fun to be, a mentor in that way, because I think of guys like Joey Sankey, right? He's one of those guys too, that had a lot of success in his career. And, we're the same kind of stature, but I go back to heart over height. You care about it, you commit to it, and you're a good teammate and you're tough and play hard. You'll find a way to make plays on the lacrosse field and have a good career.
Smart and fast kind of eliminates size, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I think it's true. I have a freshman attack who wears number 4, is a devout follower of Will Manny, and he's the smartest kid that I've ever seen. He's about 115 pounds, but he's going to be a college player at some point. He's going to grow to be about 155, 160. He's got the IQ now, and he's learning, and he's finally trying to figure out a way to work fast and kind of get through the process. Let me just take you sort of chronologically kind of through the process. Obviously, Long Island, grew up at St. Anthony's. How'd you end up at UMass?
Yeah. Again, for me, I'm the oldest in my family. It's just me and my younger sister. And so it was the first experience for my family going through a recruiting process. And back when I was getting recruited, oh my God, 15 years ago now, or even longer, it is how it is now, right? You get contacted your September 1st of your junior year, right? And then there was a bunch of years where you can get contact 8th graders, et cetera. I was never a part of that. So for me, it was playing for Long Island Express when I was at St. Anthony's with a bunch of my friends there. And, the club scene was on the rise at that point. It kind of I started Express the first year in 2007 or 2008 when they started. And for me, I was in the process of trying to get into, Nike Blue Chip was the biggest camp, or Top 205 were the go-to recruiting events. And I got to Top 205, which I was very excited about. I didn't get invited to Blue Chip, which, did put a little bit of a chip on my shoulder at that point. And, we didn't really have any connections at that point. I was just like, whatever, I'll do whatever I can. And I went to Top 205 and, I did my thing, and I just was trying to just be the best teammate it could be, right? Make the extra pass, not be selfish, ride hard, and just try to be different in that way. I was 5'6", 5'7", and 120 pounds soaking wet at that point. Right. And I remember getting an email from Coach Canella from UMass after that event. And he didn't talk about, you played well, you scored so many goals, this, that. He wrote me a note regarding, he remembers me riding the ball back and getting an assist. And I was like, that's the kind of coach I like. And he noticed that within a play, he wrote it down and remembered it. And for me, it was going to a prospect day or two and going to see the schools, went on a couple of visits. I didn't get any top 10 recruiting messages from Duke, Maryland, or Cuse or anything like that. So I was looking at, top 20 schools in Bucknell, Towson, Hofstra, UMass, that CAA level at that time. And when I went to UMass, I watched a practice and I knew a guy or two, Anthony Biscardi from Long Island, hosted me. And when I watched practice, I was like, this is the tempo I like to play. So much transition, fast, in and out of drills, tough ball movement. And, I did a little bit of homework when I was getting recruited, where my goal was I wanted to play lacrosse for 4 years. I didn't want to necessarily go somewhere and maybe sit on the bench for until junior year and all that kind of stuff. I wanted to play, make a difference, and use my time wisely. And when I looked at UMass, they were graduating Tim Belize and Jimmy Connolly at the time, who brought them to a national championship. And there was going to be an open spot or two at attack. And being a lefty, it was, again, another conversation with the coaching staff there at the time. Like, they needed a lefty. And, I felt at home, and I knew a couple people there. And, just the conversations with Coach Canella and the way he coached, the way his team played, was perfect for me. And, I will never regret that decision ever, because that made me who I am.
Obviously, you end up 5th all-time scorer, all kinds of accolades, All-American. What was your major of study? What did you study?
So I was a resource economics major in my undergrad. And then when I coached at Wagner, I got my master's in management.
All right. So let me flip back. A 19-year-old is a research economic major.
Resource economics. Yeah.
Resource. Okay. What do you envision if somehow lacrosse doesn't take it? What do you tell mom and dad you're going to school for? If you didn't have lacrosse, what would you be at 30?
No, it's a great question. I've definitely, I bought my first house out here over 2.5 years ago in Utah, and that's where I currently am right now. I have a lot of family, friends, and people in the real estate world out here, so that could be something I would dive into. My dad worked on Wall Street for 26 years out of high school, and now just kind of does options trading. So that could be something I look into. Luckily, my fiance, who I get married to in 12 days, she's an accountant, so she does very well for herself. I would never go into that field ever, but for me, I think, yeah, yeah. And I have a little bit of a creative mindset over the past couple of years from working with a guy like Adam Gittleman and being creative of how to affect the lacrosse world. And, could be some consulting work, could be, something along those lines. But right now I'm in a really good spot with what I'm doing, playing pro and running, one of my favorite things in the world in Utah Summit with Bubba Fairman and Adam Gittleman, two of my greatest friends. And, I'm pretty happy where I am right now.
I asked that question. You can certainly make a living at being in lacrosse, but it's, some of these younger kids sort of have, pipe dreams. And if you've got a PLL salary, you're not going to, PLL salary is equal to probably a third-year teacher. And I sometimes, use that as a process. It's not a knock. It's just with endorsements, everything else, you can make a living at it. But it's not football money. It's not NFL, NBA, or American League, Major League Baseball money. But you can, again, like you said. So I was just curious. When you come home and tell mom and dad you're going to be involved in that business as part of that, I'm assuming they got to be pretty happy, because it's a productive business.
Yeah. And for me, when I graduated from UMass, I worked in finance at Bank of America for 1.5 years. So I got a taste of it. And I had a great experience with it. I just didn't feel, I felt like in that moment, right? I was in my first 2 years in the pros playing for Boston, and I was like, I need to be on a lacrosse field, right? I just feel like my passion right now is there, and you don't get your whole entire life to play pro and have this. And I wanted to take that chance of where can this go, right? And that immediately went to college coaching. Matt Posque, who was on my Cannons team, one of the best crease attackmen of all time, national champion at Virginia and MLL champion. He was coaching at Wagner College at the time. And I spoke with him and I was like, look, like, I know you're in college coaching. If you hear anybody in the lacrosse world say that they need a graduate or assistant or something, let me know. I want to get my master's in coach and see if I like college coaching. I've had, I've been over a year in finance at Bank of America. I want to see if I can do the college coaching thing. If not, I can always go back. I had a really good relationship with my manager at Bank of America. I trained his son in lacrosse twice a week after work. And when I had the chance to go to Wagner, my Bank of America manager was like, "You're crazy if you don't go get your master's for free." Right. And I was very grateful that doing that, Wagner paid for that. And as soon as I stepped on my first practice field with Wagner and the Seahawks, I was like, this is where I was meant to be, and coaching and giving back to the game. And for me, when I coached at Utah and then Summit was an option, knowing my dad and my parents, they were very happy for me to run my own business and learn, that side of it and be an entrepreneur in a way, but I'm also doing what I love at the same time. And for me, it's, a dream come true.
6 years with the Cannons, MLL. In those days, there was no PLL at the time.
Yeah. So I was with the Cannons from 2013 through 2016, and then got traded to the Lizards for my last 2 seasons before the PLL started.
So basically the MLL morphed essentially into the PLL. I mean, I understand there's different ownership and those kinds of things, but is the PLL, and answer this or don't answer this, and I can cut it if it's an unfair question. You see the PLL going in the same direction as the end of what the MLL was going?
No.
Okay.
I don't. I think there's just so many people invested and committed to making this work, and credit to Mike and Paul and the whole back office, Rachel DeCecco, and the media team and everybody. It really is a different experience, and that's where it is fun for me because I'm a veteran in this league now, and you see all these young guys, and they had no idea what the MLL was like. Not that I ever look back as a bad, like it gave me this opportunity, right? I'm never going to bash on the MLL ever,
right,
because I was very grateful to play in 2 great locations. I've met lifelong friends and Scott Ratliff and all these other guys that I'm tight with now, but it is different. And getting paid a little bit more, getting treated a little bit differently, eating better, all those things come into play. And you look at it from a wide lens. It's like Paul is using his experiences from the MLL to give back to the players as best as he can, with other business-minded people, and getting us on television and all this stuff that you can't ask for much more in the moment. And hopefully, when my time is done playing, it's like my first call is going to be to those guys and be like, how can I help? Because why not? Why wouldn't I do that? Right. For something that's given me 10 to 15 years of my life of getting to do what I love at a high level in front of so many fans, I want to help in some way. Right. And I always joke around. I feel like there's a path in the future for me to be in the booth with Ryan Boyle at some point, but I want to be a part of it somehow. And that's what I'm going to look to do.
It's an interesting thread. We had a chance last year to interview, I think, 7 out of the 8 PLL Hall of Fame guys that were inducted, Mark Millen and that whole crew. And they went back to the club days. And I say went way back. We're talking 20 years. Essentially, the clubs morphed into the MFL, which is now, so if you follow that thread, it really has taken each invention of itself has become a better model. Maybe that's just the growth of the sport. And I think that was something, because if you talk to Mark Millen, you talk to, some of those guys, go back and see some of those club teams. It was like the original 68 team in the NHL. Guy second line for the Red Wings makes the Hall of Fame. Well, the guy second line for the Red would have been a star on one of the other 28 current teams. I think that's sometimes overlooked in that process. And I think the sport hopefully is taken another step. I don't think a lot of people know you still hold the record for the most points in any professional game at 11. That's an amazing game. Was it just, you just must have had a bad goalie, or was it just a great day?
It was when it was the first year of the PLL for the first pick game in Philly. We played the Atlas, and that was when there was no 32-second shot clock face-off rule. And that game, Trevor didn't play for the Atlas. So I think we won like 80 to 90% of the face-offs that day. And we got a lot of possessions. And I think Marcus and I both had 7 goals. I had 4 assists. it was just one of those games that it was just rolling our way. And I didn't even know in the moment what it was until after the game. We were just having so much damn fun. It was the game right before the championship game with the Whips and Redwoods. There's 10 to 12,000 people in Philly, and we were just vibing. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I didn't even remember that until you brought that up, but that's pretty cool to think about. And with how fast paced the game is, it's, that's almost, I was talking with Marcus after that game. It's like, when you look at it now, a guy can be feeling it in the game and you're just like, damn, he's on fire. He can't be stopped. And he's at 7 or 8 points, but that's just how fast the game is, right? 12-minute quarters, this, that. You almost have to have a perfect game to have over 10 points. But extra possessions and good teamwork and transition goals all led to that day. And yeah, pretty cool moment.
Welcome back. We're talking with Ron Ebert, the head lacrosse coach at Lake Orion High School. Ron has become the all-time winningest coach in Michigan high school history. 53 years. There's no one has won more games than Ron Ebert. He passed Rob Ambrose from Brother Rice, the longtime Rice head coach, this past year. And first of all, congratulations. And in a nutshell, it was a long road, but you're now the guy at the top of the mountain. So what's it like?
Well, I hate to say this, but it's not that big a deal to me. I've coached. I mean, I've coached for 50 years, and only about 20 of those have been in the high school. So I coached 15 years of college. I did JV. I did some assistant coaching back in the 70s, and so it's and somebody's going to pass me. I mean, Rhoda and Kaminskas are half my age and right on my tail, so they're probably going to pass me. So other than it's nice to have had the notoriety of it, I mean, my concern is more about winning than about the number of games. Like I said, it's very nice to have people notice it, but I'm going to get past and just because the number of years I took off, Brian's never going to coach college, Rhoda's never going to coach college, so they'll pass me soon, and I if they give them the same notoriety, good for them. But thank you very much for the accolade, and like I said, it's just it's a long time. I'm a lifer. They're going to carry me off the field, as we mentioned before. So it'll end when it ends.
Well, I think it's a benchmark, and I know that, and I appreciate you being, sort of humble about the mark, but it is certainly an unbelievable accomplishment. And I think one of deserving tone, because there's a lot of guys that are involved in the lacrosse community because of you. And I think that's something that, maybe you don't recognize as much as you should. You have a very large tree of folks that you've put branches under, so to speak. And I think that's something that I think we all have to, appreciate and understand.
Yeah, I'm very proud of. Yeah, I'm prouder of that. Of course, most of that comes from coaching, college. Like my OU guys, they're all, the guys who played for me in Oakland are all over the place, and things like that. So, it's been great going to different levels. I coached college. That took me to Japan to help at the University of Tokyo. And Nafumi Suzuki, who I worked with at the University of Tokyo, is now head of the entire Japanese national program and coached them, in the World Games. And we still talk. And I haven't been to Japan since the turn of the century. So those things are not just coaching. High school has led to wonderful things in my life that what do you call experiences. So I can't complain about the fact that I spent 15 to 20 years out of the high school game.
One question I want to kind of bring it back to the finals is that in terms of your winning that last game, you're going to play. This is now this past spring. You're playing for that game that's going to mean that you're going to go to that number one spot. Internally, wasn't there at least a little something that was pushing to know that? Was there some self-awareness of what you'd accomplished?
No, not at all. I mean, sorry. Awareness, yes, but like anticipation, like this is the game that's going to put me past there. No, No,
Okay.
I don't. That's just, and that's why, we kind of joked about, how important it felt to me, and it just, no. I mean,
Okay.
I've done it a long time. It doesn't have any bearing on, like I said, the AD threw a nice little party for us after that game, but to me, it was embarrassing because I don't want to have a party in the middle of the season, because it took away from. I feel it takes away from, the teams, like teams like in the middle of the season, like we're already partying, great, we've already accomplished our task, and I didn't. I was uncomfortable with that,
Okay.
even though I had to thank them for their appreciation.
Well, outside the Lake Orion tent, there was a lot of folks that were very happy for you and know how much you've meant to the sport and how hard you've worked. So,
Like I said, that was the more important. That was the more thing that the people felt that they wanted to show their, whatever appreciation or the impressment with what I accomplished, and that was very nice hearing from, everybody that's involved with lacrosse with me in the last 50 years.
well, congratulations again. We appreciate the time you've spent with us today, and we wish you the best of luck come next spring.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Welcome back. We're talking with Bryce Brubaker, who's going to be our technical expert in season 4. We're going to talk about a number of things. Bryce Brubaker is standing here in his store in Grosse Pointe, right on Mac. If you have a question, you're certainly going to look below. You'll see all the information about where the process is. But you're kind of the tech guru for this part of the world. So we're going to talk today about 3D gloves. I heard the term first time. I know they've been on the market 2 or 3 years, but I heard the term for the first time literally a week ago. Explain to me what 3D gloves are.
Well, STX has kind of taken over the market with the RZR, which is the first glove to reinvent the process for which a glove is built. So on your typical old leather gloves, it's around 100, 120 pieces of construction. And on the RZR, it's a one-piece construction. So basically it allows a lot more mobility in all the fingers. And with all that reduced pieces and parts, you got the lightest glove on the market.
Okay, so let's start about cost. Where are these priced in terms of a regular glove?
This is the highest end of the market, so these are right under $200. These come in at $179.99
Okay.
for the RZR.
Light obviously gives you you can move hands better, you can move fingers better, which certainly attacks would like to see. Talk a little bit about protection because they are in fact lighter.
Well, this glove, I don't know if it's the strongest and most protective glove on the market, but the players nowadays are all about performance and agility. So that's where they really dial in and want to use this glove instead of others.
So for somebody like me who's not the brightest guy in the world, we're talking about 3D technology is where you see things literally made out of a piece of plastic.
Yeah.
Which essentially what this is all one piece.
Yeah, it all comes out in one piece from the factory.
So this whole thing is all one piece where it would have been a bunch of pieces.
Down to the fingers, you see the fingers are 7 different moving parts. On your traditional gloves, it's 3 pieces of leather, sewn to 3 pieces of leather. And it's actually probably easier for them to produce these, but with it being a new technology, they are the most expensive gloves on the market.
You talked briefly before we started the interview that STX is the only one with this patent. So my question becomes, are they the ones offering this technology?
Yes, this is the only glove on the market like this. You're starting to see some companies trying to replicate it, but with the 2 US patents they have, they can't do the one piece across the entire glove. So you see some people trying to do it in the fingers or other parts of the glove, but this is the only one that's close to this.
I think a technology changed from leather goalie pads to what is now. Goalie pads were lighter and heavier, or excuse me, were smaller and heavier in the old days, and they're lighter, so you get to be able to move those kinds of things. Do you see 3D technology maybe going into shoulder pads, going to other parts of it, elbow pads?
I definitely see it going across the board. I think it'd be easier for them to make the products, and then with what I've seen out of these, with the lightness and the mobility, that's what today's player really desires.
A lot of gloves come back because seams wear out.
Yes.
You don't have seams in this glove.
Yes, that's true. I've rarely seen these gloves ripped or worn out. I've had players get to 2 years out of this particular pair of gloves, which ends up being worth it in the long run, the little extra cost.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, Brian Kamenskis here with Clarkston Lacrosse. We're going to talk today about what we call six-shooter defense, where when we're playing on the crease, we play ball side inside. Pretty simple concept. If the ball is top left right now, I'm going to play on his inside shoulder on the ball side of the field. My stick will be upfield in the passing lane, and I can see the ball. I can see my man at all times. I know my 2-slide is on his back shoulder, so we always have him covered wherever he goes. If you see my hips, My hips are what we call in a six shooter position, where think of an old time Western. When you walk through the saloon gates, you have your 6 shooters out. You can see all sides of the saloon, and you're ready to go if anybody starts to get dangerous on you. So very simple. My hip's going to be facing here. The ball's going to be top left. I see ball, me man at all times. If the ball were to transfer, it's just a simple step over. Same thing. Hip to the man, hip to the ball, me man, 6 shooter defense.
Welcome back. John and I are going to have a conversation weekly with other voices. We're going to have a chance to have a conversation about any variety of subjects. I think it's important to have an intelligent discussion about the landscape that we are involved in and processing. There's always water cooler discussions about lacrosse, and they never really get aired. They never really have a chance to have those discussions. We might discuss some things that we agree upon. We might find some things that we disagree upon. But I think that's something that hopefully we'll have an intelligent conversation. And if we don't know something about a subject, we'll bring somebody on board. And I think that's where we're going to try and have a little bit of an editorial view on lacrosse. And I think, John, you and I both have shared those conversations endlessly over the last year. Yeah. And why not try to pick those up on air? So hopefully it'll be a good segment.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's, you get snippets of it on social media and on Twitter and the comments and all those things and some of these topics. And I think, just like you said, I think it's important for us to be able to bring it out there and talk about it verbally, right? The actual communication of using words rather than a keyboard.
Well, I had one and I said, we're going to start right in on one because I very rarely do I go to Facebook and post. I'm an old newspaper columnist, and I spent a lot of years writing columns. And so every once in a while, something just gets inside the brain and rattles around. And one of my players decided to go to a prospect day. And I thought, well, that's really cool. Everybody has prospect days. At this game, it was for a club team. And on top of being for a club team, it turns out he had to pay a couple of $100s. And it just hit me wrong. You have to pay to go to a prospect day to try out for a team you're going to pay to play for anyway. It just didn't hit me. And so the premise of this discussion is that lacrosse is becoming in some places too expensive. And I think we need to air some understanding, because I actually talked to some parents on my own team that thought they really needed to go to prospect day to get a chance to try out for an MCLA club team. That's absurd. And in a lot of cases, especially some of the lower MCLA lacrosse teams, there's some unbelievably really good coaches in the MCLA. And there's some coaches that are not so good. But to pay for money. So my first question to you, tell me if you think I'm completely out of my mind. Prospect days, usually run by universities, are for recruiting only. Bring their guys in, get a chance to do it. But a lot of schools try to make a profit off of it. And I'm not sure parents understand that. And I think of the old 205 camps and the old 105 camps where they'd have 600 kids come to camp, but the 105 kids that were invited didn't pay anything. And those were the only guys going to play in the All-Star game. Switching to Dodge, like as if somebody didn't know that. And water doesn't necessarily seek its own level. So my point to you is, your son goes to a prospect camp and you got to figure out that you got to pay. Am I out of my mind when I think that this is maybe a little bit ridiculous?
No, I don't think so at all, Greg. I mean, if we start from the premise that lacrosse is becoming, very money driven, and it's pricing people out that that would be better served doing other things. And I think, I understand that each college and university, when they put on a prospect day, there are expenses, right? I get that, right? You got to pay for people's time and they're giving away t-shirts or whatever they're doing, right? But I think there's a tipping point in terms of what you're charging for that. And if you're using the prospect day, that's my biggest thing is that, they're not really using the prospect day to prospect for kids. They're really using the day to, earn income and to use that income towards their program or their coaches or whatever that might be. And it's just disingenuous, right? I mean, it would be better served to say, let's make it a camp or a day of clinic or something of that nature. Just be transparent in what you're doing, because if they're already filled for their 2024s, or they've got one spot and yet they're having 100 kids there saying, we're going to pick a kid or give them the impression and charging them $100, that's not going to work for me.
Well, part of the discussion, I coached the Michigan State women's team for a long time. we used to take trips to Santa Barbara. We used to go to Texas. We used to do our regular Midwest tour, which is basically the same schools that a lot of the Midwestern men's teams play. And I think we've charged $800 or $900. Now, I was dumb enough not to have a salary as a coach, and that's my problem. I understand that. And I understand prospect days, in some cases, sometimes take care of assistant coaches and try to pay for some of those deals. But what are you learning at a prospect day would be my first question. And the argument is, well, how much it costs. Well, I've had the same schedule, and I know that some of our men's teams in the area, all the way down into Ohio, are in the thousands of dollars to play for a club team.
Right.
We went to Santa Barbara and we did the rest of it, and without coaches getting paid. And we took those trips, and we took 5-day trips into Santa Barbara and different kind of places. We just were maybe better with the pencil because we weren't trying to make hay out of it when the kids are paying for it anyway. I don't know. It hit me the wrong way as a prospect camp. And John Paul, the old Michigan coach, who's now living in Utah, sent me a little note saying that when we ran camps in the old days of the MCLA, or even when he was running the NCAA varsity version team, they were very transparent. They were for-profit training camps.
Mm-hmm.
I got no problem with that.
Right.
I have no problem with any of those kinds of things, but I don't know. I just think in talking with a bunch of parents that we talked to, they did not know. They felt it was an obligation because that's the way it was sold. And
yeah, it's transparency. I mean, I think that's the key word here. Transparency. What are you accomplishing? What's the goal? Why do I want to send my son there? What is the expectation? Do I think that if I don't go to this prospect camp that he's not going to make the team? Or, what are we doing here? I mean, make it what it is. I mean, we'll talk about this later about really the landscape of club lacrosse and the dollars being spent. We'll get to there, but we're going to stay focused on the prospect camp situation. But it really is, one and the same. It's individuals seeing the opportunity that people will pay it. And in their mind, it's a business, and lacrosse is being run more like a business than I've ever seen.
As an old columnist and editorial writer, I always used to believe that if I had a thought, because I think I'm a pretty middle of the road kind of normal, not too much on either side. I think I'm kind of normal. If I think it, then there's probably a good chance that a good majority of the folks are going to think it. Think of it this way. Somebody says to you, "Oh my God, I had all these phone calls." And you say, "Well, how many did you have?" And it turns out all these people that call, it turns out to be 2. Everything is hyped. And I get that. I don't have an issue for that. But all these water cool discussions, when you have these conversations with parents, you're entitled to go to any prospect day to pay any amount you want. But wouldn't it make sense to ask the question before you go about what your value is? Mm-hmm. And the interesting part of this discussion, and the reason we're talking about it, is I'm not looking to burn anybody. I think the prospect camps that we're talking about that are being run are actually being run by reputable guys. But the people that are going don't know, because here's the litmus test for me. When asking one of my players, what did you learn at your $150 or $200 prospect camp? Well, not very much. Well, is it my job as a high school coach? Is it my job as a commentator to try to provide value? That's certainly a subjective discussion, but I think we have to look out for the landscape, because I think there are some of those guys in the world that are not necessarily. This is not a new subject for me. Yeah. I've been railing about the quality of cost for a long time, and I think that's kind of what we're doing here. So.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, again, I've used the word multiple times, but transparency, right? And I always say, did your son or daughter improve as a player, right? Is the juice worth the squeeze? That's one of my favorite sayings I use in all walks of my business life and lacrosse life. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Did you gain from that? Is your player a better player? And if the answer is no, we always talk about how many touches. I mean, how many times do you touch the ball, right? If they're a midi or an attackman. If it's not worth it, then why do it? Just because everyone else is doing it, or because you're told that you need to go to this, doesn't mean you need to go to this, right? We just follow. Lacrosse has turned into a follower sport where, okay, because so-and-so is going there and this club says that they're the best, and this kid signed D1 and with this club, and well, I got to do the same thing. Make your own decisions and have some transparency and ask questions.
I think the important part of the other voices is that obviously we're trying to enlighten some folks. We're also going to talk about some good things, but I also think in a sport that is not growing, and we're going to get into that discussion fairly soon here, we're not growing at the rate we were 5 years ago. We're just not. The kids aren't coming back. It's the pandemic. It's any number of reasons. So being able to pick the right channels and having the right information, maybe somebody picks up a phone and says, what are you providing for me for my prospect camp next time?
Yeah,
And
it's
that's
my
all
son or
this,
daughter. Yeah. I
if
think
that's
it
all
matters.
this, yeah, if this all this
Yeah.
this conversation comes to,
Yeah.
then I think we've done a service to the community.
That's the thing, just making, if we can get one or two people to think twice about spending that money to see where they could take that money and use it and work with, an individual person, right? I mean, you look at the fundamentals of the game of just simple catching and throwing, right? The game has evolved, and we'll get into it, and we could go on for, multiple hours already, but you got to do, and we're not going to tell people how to spend their money, right? People can spend their money how they want to. There's other things that maybe just going and meeting someone and becoming lifelong friends, or who knows, right? There's other things that can come out of it from a positive perspective, but we've got to focus on, here's the nuts and bolts of what is it accomplishing? That's really the thing.
All right. I got to go back to your squeeze. Say that again.
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Okay. I got to put that on a t-shirt. I'm not, that's the first time I've heard that. I'm sure it's gone through 100 times, but
I've been saying it for a number of years. I'll give credit to, my former mentor, Tom McGraw here in the insurance industry, started me on it, and it's just so appropriate, right? In so many different ways. Is the juice worth the squeeze?
That's a really interesting anecdote there. I like the idea of squeezing in the juice, and we got to do a t-shirt with that. But that said,
I like it. Right.
Our first, hopefully this opened up some eyes, and thanks for that. And we'll be back with Will Manny in a couple seconds. Marcus, you're referring to as Marcus Holman, who you played with the Archers for a good long time. That kind of changed. And I want to take a little bit. You had a good career with the Archers, but then you became a free agent. You had a chance to kind of maybe test the waters, end up with the Whipsnakes. Jim Stignat has been on the show. That's a whole nother conversation. He is such an eclectic, interesting guy. He reminds me a little bit of the Seattle coach and Pete Carroll. And this kind of, they don't think the same way as a lot of the guys in the same business. I think Mr. Stignata is a sort of a unicorn in the world, because he's a smart guy, but he also understands intellect and understands how to coach. I think one of the reasons you ended up at the Whipsnakes is because of a conversation you had with him early on.
Yeah, and for me, I never thought I'd be leaving the Archers. I thought I was going to be an Archer for life kind of thing, but it happens in sports, and programs and teams and organizations look a different way. And for me, it was like, I've been playing 11 years and I've only made it to a semifinal, right? Twice. And it's like, I haven't won yet. And obviously the Whipsnakes have been really dominant in the PLL for years now. And I know a lot of those guys on that team. And when I discussed with the Archers organization that I'm going to go into free agency here, since they didn't want to re-sign me right away, I got on the phone with Stags, and we had a really good conversation, and I felt wanted. I felt like I fit in well there. I could help that offense in many ways, and I feel like I did that. I had a really great experience getting to play with guys like Matt and Zed and Brad Smith and Tucker Dordovic and Keegan Kahn and all these guys that we got to experience on the offensive end. Mike Chanichuk, one of my high school teammates that I got to reunite with. We underperformed, no doubt. We kind of went through a injury bug, not an excuse. It's just we didn't have our starting lineup on offense until week 7 or 8, honestly. So it just took us a long time to get going. And I made this move. I thought it was good for me. It was obviously between the Whips and the Cannons, and I had a great conversation with Coach Holman, right? Kind of a second father to me, and they had just traded for Matt Cavanaugh, and I didn't really want to start a little inclusive argument / who's going to be playing attack, who's going to be playing midi thing. I think Cav's a really tremendous player and competitor, and he deserved to get traded as well and start fresh with the Cannons from the Redwoods. And so I chose the Whipsnakes, and we have some unfinished business to do, because a lot of us are pretty pissed off after this year for sure. And, the league's not getting any easier. It's competitive. And you look at the Cannons this year, they go from 1 win to making it to the semis. You got to show up every weekend. You got to put in the work during the week. And, our team is determined to do that moving forward. And, we definitely let it slip a little bit this year, but I'm never going to look back on a decision and regret what I choose, because I did feel like I was in the right spot and performed well.
You didn't get the ring, but I mean, you're playing an attack that maybe is as strong, a talented attack as I keep thinking back to the Gates and Marichek. I mean, that kind of level of talent on your attack. And, there was always, I went back and looked at some early film all the way back to when you played at UMass. And there's always this conversation about, you can't play off ball, or he's got this, he's got that, you can't do the rest of it. But your scoring numbers have always been pretty balanced. And you had great opportunity. You're a great shooter, but the picks that you set, some of the kinds of things you're doing now, you were doing then. So I thought to some extent when I was watching this thing, because I use you with my little guy, Nate Roberts gets a chance. I'll say, well, watch this. We watched it together to kind of get ready for this interview. And I was surprised you were playing the same way. Listen, you've gotten better, certainly. But I think a lot of the things about your makeup that I don't think a lot of it was accurate, because I don't think guys were looking at the way you played then. You played the same way you'd play now.
Yeah. And there's critics always, right? Haters, whatever you want to call it. And I really have committed, from the people I've surrounded myself with, the Holmans and Adam, like, I see bad tweets, bad comments on Instagram after certain things, right, all the time. And like, I just laugh at it. I'm like, these people have nothing better to do and they have no idea. Right. And what I try to take pride in is being consistent. And I've been consistent my whole entire career. And, that's one thing I love about Marcus as a best friend, right? When my season ended, he's just like, you're one of the most consistent players of all time. The numbers don't lie. And, I'm just proud of you, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I take pride in that, because a lot of guys can have a really good year, but then they go away for 3 and then they retire. And it's like, everyone always looking for the fancy goal and this highlight. And it's just like, no, like, look who's doing, like, one guy I always think about is Eric Law, right? Eric Law he's not fancy anymore. He's kind of like me, a leader, communicator, off ball guy. And it's like, he was top 10 in points again, or he is for the past 8 years, just like myself in a row. Right. And so it's like, I respect those guys. I always appreciate and love seeing some of these younger guys come into the league and do well, but I respect the guys that do it for a long time at a high rate consistently. And that's not just going down the alley and poking in that down the alley shot. You have to do so many different things to be able to produce and be consistent and last long in this league. So again, for me, guys like Eric Law, guys like Marcus, I respect the hell out of, because they do all those things at a consistent rate and care a lot.
You can't play in the pros for 12 years and not ride hard. And the other thing I noticed was you've been a lot of places, but where you've been, you've always ended up as captain. You've always ended up in a leadership role, which says a lot about what your teammates think of you. And that's really, at the end of the day, all that matters, because the locker room is what I'm 69. I'll be moving on here at some point. I think what I've been missed more than anything is the locker room, the kids. That's the kind of the part of it. So let me get into Eric Law was on the show. He's doing some great things in Denver, not unlike what you're doing with Utah Summit. So let me ask how it started. And then the follow-up question is, Chris Colin, who's the University of Detroit Mercy coach here, who's been visited with you a number of times. Chris kind of turned me on to some teaching methods that you were involved in. And I've embraced some of them. My son played for Denver for a little while. So he played for Jamie, and it's the odd guys out in terms of, it's not always the mainstream. You don't have to be a Division I player anymore to be a Division I coach. That's part of that thread we've been talking about. So talk a little bit about, start with, how did Utah Summit get its start? And then maybe explain a little bit about your teaching ideas and your methods.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm very grateful for what we created out here in Utah. And the state of Utah now has a Division I school in their backyard for these kids to go and be inspired on Saturdays in the spring, right? And that was the goal. The goal was coming out here and starting the Division I program, then getting into a conference, and all that has been completed and green lighted. And we're very grateful to see, I have 10 of the University of Utah players working for me with our Summit program and coaching our young kids out here. And I'm just so happy to see the seniors this year, which was, one of our first classes that we recruited, doing so well and leading the program in the right way. And when we first moved out, it was like, we got asked by numerous people, and, Lori and Brian Holman wanted to start a youth club organization, right? And we were limited when we first started because we needed to be in a 50-mile radius due to NCAA restrictions from campus. So we just started out calling it Salt Lake Summit Lacrosse Club. And we hired the Utah players. We got local, high school coaches and people that we knew from the community from the first year we were out here. And we put a club together. We had, I don't know how many kids at that time. We had 7 or 8 teams, and we started with 6, then we went to 8, and we grew year to year. And it was great, right? It was a little side gig for us to do after a day of work at Utah, and got the kids out on the field to coach, which helped grow their minds as the lacrosse players and just build the community, right? We wanted to run the lacrosse world and community out here the way that we know it's run on the East Coast, and give more people options to play. So when the Holmans ended up leaving Utah and going back east, Adam and I, looked at each other and said, what are we doing here? Are we going to go our separate ways and look to coach somewhere else? Or are we going to go a different path? Or are we going to work together here and rebrand, rename, and just open up a new entity and run with this thing? Because we have a gold mine on our hands. And we did that. So we rebranded to Utah Summit. We didn't have to be in the 50-mile radius anymore. We can go to the whole entire state. And now we're at 10 boys teams, 4 girls teams on our link side, and Megan Whittle runs our girls side. We have over 300 kids in our program, and it's on the rise. Our teams are winning tournaments. They're getting to championships. The kids are getting noticed by college coaches, right? I've been on the phone since 9/1, just working to get our kids information and prospect days and visits set up. And it truly is amazing to see the growth of the game out here. Not just with the amount of kids that are starting to play and continue to play, but how fast our kids are getting better at the game by committing themselves for a full year in the weight room, on the field, coming to all of our skills clinics, right? And nothing makes me happier. And those are the kids that I'm going to know for 6, 7, 8 years, that when they do get recruited, I'm going to be like, this kid went from not even having elbow pads or gloves at his first practice to he's, just watch him play, and you'll want him on your team and let their play do the talking and make it easy for me. And that's something that I'm really looking forward to this fall, because we've added some new players, more families come over. We had over 350 kids try out for our club this year. And this fall is going to be phenomenal. And then the second part of the question, there's some tactical pieces, right? We have a 25 slide player manual and handbook that we've put together over the years, and it truly is special. And, I'd be happy to, talk about some of it, but we have our pillars, that Brian Holman used at the University of Utah, uses with the Cannons now, and those are honesty, humility, gratitude, passion, and trust. And for me, just tactically, and I would love to just bounce a question back off of you if there's something that Coach Chris said, but as an offensive player, one thing I strive to teach every single time out there and instill into my kids is the 3-second rule. Right? A 3-second rule is you pass, you move the ball, you cut, or you communicate every 3 seconds. Right? And if you're standing on the crease and you're just ball watching for more than 3 seconds, right? I want my kids to have that triggered in their mind. Oh, I've been 3 seconds. I'm going to exchange with somebody. I'm going to cut. I'm going to go set a pick. And it's helpful, right? Because so many kids get lost in the sauce, just looking around and standing there like cones. And if you're a Dodger and you've had the ball on your stick and you rolled back 3 or 4 times, move the ball, get it out of your stick, because you'll get it back at some point if that's what you want to do. But we don't want to play me ball. We don't want to play hero ball. We need to let the ball do the work. And that's why I teach that, is because that's how I've made my living, right? I've never been a one-on-one Dodger for 8 seconds. I catch it off ball movement and I can beat somebody. I score assisted goals because I'm cutting and guys know to look to feed for each other. So offensively, that's one thing I teach every single day we're out there. But I would helpfully answer anything if you have anything written down that I can elaborate on.
No, that's a really good answer. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Ours is, you talk about 3 seconds. Ours is just go fast, go somewhere fast. I don't care where you go, especially beginner players. We'll teach them how to, once I get you going fast, I don't get you to go fast in the right spot. Because sometimes they just, that's that hesitation kind of stuff, especially with new kids. The reason I'm asking the question is the thread, again, back to the show, is that there's all kinds of guys in the Midwest teaching box lacrosse, which is what I grew up with, and they've never played box lacrosse. So what they're really teaching is lacrosse in a small space, because they're teaching box lacrosse is a horizontal game and field lacrosse is a vertical game. But there's no conception yet. They've got their, so travel can be really good, but they can also, at the same argument, it's also can be somewhat carpetbagging, because there's a lot of guys that hang their shingles out. And that's why I'm asking about culture, because that's one of the things that Chris talked about. Your kids are learning the game, and you're not just collecting a check. I know that sounds crazy, but there's very specific things, and 3 seconds is the perfect example of the culture you're trying to teach. I think that's huge.
Yeah. And what Adam, brought up, and we have it in our manual, is right. Lacrosse is a hobby to a lot of people. It's our lifestyle, right? And what we want our kids to live by is that, right? Like, make it your lifestyle, the way you operate in the classroom, the way you operate at home, like be the best teammate, be the best brother you could be, right? And no, I don't do this for the money, right? Like, is it better than college coaching? Sure, because I could put on more events. I can get out on the field more and do that, right? But no, I would do this for anything, because it's ours. We own it, and we have the families that see the benefit from not just the lacrosse learning. We teach these kids how to be young men, right? And picking stuff up on the sideline and sweeping the sheds, right? And looking at your coach in the eye when they're talking, and running on and off the field to respect the game, right? So that's more important at times, right? Or more often than not, because, we only play in X amount of tournaments and you practice way more and around the kids. We do run box lacrosse out here as well. But just seeing the kids grow up and be better leaders and better kids is all that matters in the end, because if they become better people, they'll become better lacrosse players. It's guaranteed, right? They'll do better in the classroom. They'll be better people around outside of the field. And when they have that confidence with themselves to be great people, they'll be better lacrosse players. If they're a kid that struggles in school and wears his chin strap on his nose and drags a stick around the field, you ain't going to cut it, right? And it's getting to that point out here now where we've had to make decisions on kids who do have that bad body language, and a kid bumped them in the depth chart and that kid got cut, and he was in our club the past couple of years. We didn't have to do that for the past 3 or 4 years because we were kind of working with anything that we had. Now we're at a point where it's like these people are committing to that lifestyle of what Utah Summit's all about compared to any competitors. And it's different, right? Because of the people we, have at the top, and myself, Adam and Bubba, our coaches and our families.
I'm guessing you learned that paradigm from your dad, but I'm guessing also that you picked it up, a lot of it, from Brian Holman. And I'm guessing if you didn't do that, Brian would take that stick that's on your wall behind you, give you a whack side of the head, because he's like me, old school, in understanding that you want kids to. And the only reason I'm asking the question is that there's an unbelievable world of travel that's very successful. And I also think there's a dark edge to that. There's a bunch of guys hanging out shingles that don't necessarily shouldn't be hanging out shingles, put it that way.
Yeah.
So we try to be as honest with them as when I'm talking to a travel coach and I ask him something simple about explaining, pass down, pick down, and he can't explain it to me. I'm not sure why we coach a 7th grade team.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of that discussion.
Yeah. And that's like, if you, and I'm sure Chris spoke about this when he came to our Mountain West Primetime event. Like, we have a plan for every single practice. It's timed. It's like a college level practice, right? And, I've been to events out here where there's guys laying down on the field evaluating and during their tryouts. And I'm just like, how do parents not see this stuff? Like, there's a clear, evident black and white difference of people that care and are doing it for the right reasons versus not. And I'm never worried about that with any of our coaches or anything that we do, because, we're one of those places where the coaches will always have more energy than the kids because we just love the game so much. hopefully at some point they can override us and overtake that, but it's hard because that's just how passionate we are about the game. And to your point earlier, like I learned a lot of life lessons from my parents, no doubt, about how to be, respectful and hardworking. But on the lacrosse side of things, Brian Holman is definitely, the guy that taught me those lessons of how to go from on or off the field with the same honest, open, grateful mindset that I always have now.
I have a banquet speech which includes a story about being the Michigan State women's lacrosse club coach for about 10 years. And a dad sitting next to me on a flight who had never met me and all the way to Santa Barbara was explaining to me how his daughter had gotten a full ride and how many goals she scored and what a terrific young lady she was. Well, he was right about she was a terrific young lady. And I finally introduced myself, and he felt a little embarrassed because he was kind of BSing about his daughter to the guy she was playing for, and kind of pointed out to him that she was paying about $800 to play on a club team and that this was not NCAA. And I didn't have an office next to Tom Izzo. Did it out of the love of the process. And I always remember that story when I start talking to those kind of situations, because it kind of, again, that thread of being able to help kids get to a better place.
Yep. Listen, no, and that's it, right? When we got the job at Utah, we had a jail cell style office when we first moved onto campus. But when we were still an MCLA team, our office was a restaurant right up the road that we met at every morning for breakfast, pretty much, right? And we worked out of our houses. And Brian, kudos to him with the pillars and our absolutes of our programs and everything that we push our kids to do. Like, it's always no excuses, find a way, right? Make it happen, right? And that's the type of people we're surrounding ourselves with out here. And the tide is turning, right? The people that don't hop on board and make it their lifestyle are falling backwards. Not that it's a bad thing. They're kind of just plateauing, and there's kids and families that are thriving with it and want to commit to it. And, we ain't changing that ever. So it's going to be a really cool experience moving forward. And, our club is starting to become more recognized, right? We're not doing it for that right now. We're just trying to get better and do it the right way and teach our kids lacrosse, and that stuff will naturally happen. But, the more and more kids that are getting seen on the East Coast, right? We take our kids to the East Coast twice this fall coming up. And, I got coaches excited to watch our boys play, and that makes my, whole entire round 360 circle, come to play, and just get to watch them ball out and do their thing. And then our younger teams, those kids have more energy and passionate for lacrosse than I've seen in a long time, and the future is bright. So it's going to be a fun ride here.
Well, I appreciate you spending the time with us. This will be a great kickoff to our fourth season, and it's been a real delight to talk to you. You're just a cool guy, and I appreciate the opportunity to do that. We'll hopefully have this up. I think October 5th is when we debut. So have a great winter. Best of luck. We'll all have our fingers crossed that you can sort of finish the PLL trailer next year and find that ring on your hand come September. And again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, Greg, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate what you do for the game, and, little conversations like this. And I listen to podcasts. I watch documentaries all the time to learn. And I have my lacrosse notebook that I've had since college that I renew if it runs out, but just always constantly learning. And people like yourself, just very grateful to have conversations and learn about people and yourself. Just keep doing what you're doing, and, the right people will always respect it. And the critics and haters will do what they do, but you just silence it out. And, just appreciate you having me on and here if you ever need anything.